Kritiji, we are live.
Hi, good evening, and welcome everyone for this roundtable. And I'm just going to kick it off. Indrani has told us some background rules, but let me just get us all started. All right, here we go. All right. So I hope I'm audible to everyone. And Indrani, you are admitting people, right? So I'll just ignore. Is that okay?
Yes, yes.
Great, great. So a big welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining the Catalyst 2030 India Nutrition Collaborative Roundtable. It is the India Nutrition Collaborative Catalyst 2030 is a new initiative that envisions to bring different stakeholders together really for focusing on SDG 2 and 3, focusing on nutrition. And today's roundtable really, we thought it is let's take a first step in thinking through opportunities and maybe missed opportunities which exist in the evolving landscape that the policy landscape, the regulatory landscape, the nutrition landscape, so to say, and see what are the opportunities that can be used, that can be leveraged to mainstream nutrition. Now, the panel of speakers, and a big thank you and a very big welcome to all of you. You will see the speakers on the screen. But if I start introducing, I think the collective wisdom that exists on this laptop screen of mine is humongous. The experience is huge. So may I request Indrani that if all the speakers' LinkedIn profiles, I know it's a LinkedIn live event, but if all the speakers' LinkedIn profiles can be put on the chat so that everybody knows everybody, and we save time on introducing people, and we go right to the themes that we have curated for today. So that is one request. A second request that I have really from the speakers, I know we have requested about 3 to 5 minutes. Let's keep it 3 minutes initially when I come to each one of you with a thematic area for you to reflect on, for you to kind of share your insights. So I know, we all know that this is by no means of imagination a fair time, but as we said, the objective today really is that we are really starting on, we're really scratching the surface today, and starting to work on an inquiry pathway really, and we would like to have some valid threads. So at India Nutrition Collaborative, we have had some meetings, so we have some kind of directions on which we have curated some themes for reflection today. But I do know that 3 minutes to 5 minutes response is not enough, so my and from all of us here, honest appeal would be, if you have really some documents to share, some links to share, please do use the chat option. We have made sure that we will save the chat and all the material there. It will be really help for us, all of us here, to kind of understand these areas better. Clearly, you know much more than we do, and that is why we have requested for your time, and thank you, indebted to all of you for making time today. Secondly, to the participants who are attending, thank you for spending this hour of the Friday evening with us. So we know we are standing between you and the weekend. But really, if you have questions, reflections as we go to the themes, please do not hesitate. I know Indrani said raise your hand and everything, but if I were you, I would just write in, use the chat option, and just punch in my reflections, thoughts there, so that again, as I said, the success for today's 1 hour is if we have a collection of a lot of questions, a lot of reflections, a lot of insights. In case we are not able to really have a question answer session today, we would really want to keep those thoughts together and continue this discussion. As I said, this is the first of many deliberations that are going to take place. We could continue chatting on LinkedIn, or also and or have another set of discussions. So with that, last but not the least, a big thank you to my core committee, INC core committee members. Sunish, he had to travel, he can't join today. Navina and Indrani, who have really, made it possible, made all this possible, and to all the nutrition collaborative members who have taken so much time in the previous deliberations to be able to land us where we are, which is one part of what we want to do. So thank you all. So with that, let me look at my speakers, and I think the first theme that Greg is here, and I'm just looking at hey Greg, so I'm just looking at Pankaj is there, Punita is here, Karthik is there. Good, cool. So my speakers are all there. Tarun is there. Perfect. Indrajit is there. Perfect. So I would then, start with one of the subjects that we have been discussing within our collaborative is this evolving space, the regulatory space of ESG, BRSR. SEBI has come up with guidelines from BRR, now it is BRSR, and there are various regulatory frameworks that are available. So I wanted to open the discussion with this first theme, to kind of look at this evolving space and reflect on what is the opportunity for SDG 2, 3, specifically nutrition. If I may make it more specific for today's evening, is the workforce nutrition, the employee health and well-being. So how do you look at the ESG regulatory space having a potential for mainstreaming this theme? And just to open this kind of discussion, let me invite Greg, who has been traveling. And I don't know where you are, Greg, you're in Kenya or somewhere, I know now. But if you would like to kind of come in, keep your response around 3 minutes, but let us know how ACNI is looking at it and just your opening kind of thoughts on this evolving space and the opportunities that we see here. How does it make sense? So over to you, Greg.
Thank you so much, Smriti, and nice to see all of you. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about this important topic and also share what we're trying to do at Access to Nutrition Initiative. I'm actually just in Geneva at home, off to travel this weekend. So we feel this ESG space is extremely important for SDG 2 and 3. You could start by making a general statement that the world is fed by a food industry that doesn't necessarily always care about health, and we're treated by a health industry that doesn't always think about food. And we want to change that. We want to make sure that the negative externalities of bad food are really costed into the food system. So we think ESG investing that incorporates nutrition into the S, into the social part of ESG, is really important. ATNI has been in existence for 10 years, and really over COVID, during the COVID pandemic, things accelerated. This idea of health and nutrition being connected accelerated in a good way. It's unfortunate it took a pandemic for that to happen, but investors started to think, what, we need to be investing in good food if we're going to have better health in the future. And ATNI was able to leverage that and sign over 80 institutional investors. Some of the largest investors around the world are now signed up to this notion of investing responsibly in food companies that are progressively improving their offerings, their food products, and marketing them better, marketing to children, not marketing to children, I should say, by putting workforce nutrition into their company strategies. So there's over 80 now who have signed up to this, and we're working with them in a coalition approach. They manage $20 trillion of assets, which is a fifth of the world's assets under management. And good news for India, I was just looking this up. We've just had 5 Indian investors signed up to this. So Ocean Dial is one, Abacus Asset Manager is another, Equity and Investment Management. So these are just 3 of 5 who have now signed up in India to say, over time, we're going to be thinking about how we use these assets that we manage to improve the nutrition of the Indian population, but also abroad, through our investments in food companies. Smriti, you mentioned about workforce nutrition, and I know that others are on the line who have a lot more experience about this. I think, Tarun, you might mention this later, I suspect. We think workforce nutrition is an excellent way of leveraging the new guidelines, but even mandates that are coming out on ESG. So there, you mentioned about the BRSR, from SEBI. We would like to work with SEBI and others in India to start to embed one or two very simple but clear metrics on workforce nutrition into those frameworks. Because, what do we get from that? We get, firstly, a sector agnostic metric. Any industry can use it. Secondly, you get healthier employees, you get happier employees, you get better retention, and there's some evidence to all of these things, and you get a higher productivity, higher growth, GDP, et cetera. So there's a lot of reasons why workforce nutrition is the first nutrition metric to work on, but it's not where we want to stop. Our big mission at AT&I is we'd like to see at least 50% of the world's sales from food and beverage derived from healthy products. Today, based on global data, it's looking to be around 70% of foods are derived from unhealthy products. 30% of sales are derived from healthy products. We're launching an Indian index next week, where we'll be revealing brand new data on the state of the food industry in India, and it's a similar picture. And the trend lines are not great anywhere in the world, especially in emerging economies where the regulations are quite lax, and very cheap processed foods, usually ultra processed or highly processed with a lot of sugars and salts and fats and low in micronutrients, are being placed into food environments, into retail environments, and now affecting overweight and obesity, even of children in peri-urban areas. It's not even an urban area issue anymore. So we would like to see ESG investing address that as well, so that companies are held to account on what their food products look like, and also what their marketing practices are. So those are our big three. I'd say we want to work on ESG metrics around the world on three things. Firstly, workforce nutrition. Secondly, healthiness of product portfolios. And thirdly, responsible marketing. Keep it simple, keep it clear, keep it very pragmatic, and move that into mainstream ESG investing practice. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Greg. Of what you said, and I heard two things. One is, as far as the products is concerned, I think there could be a different approach or a different set of indicators, maybe more detailed indicators for the F&B and the food related businesses and companies. But as far as the workforce nutrition or employee health and well-being is concerned, that is really sector agnostic, right? It is across the sectors. So I think, yes, there is this, although amongst the ESG, S has a placeholder for employee health and well-being, but then how is that translating, or how much space does it have for the employee health and well-being and workforce nutrition is something that is to be understood and maybe kind of sharpened further, which brings me, may I bring in Punita ji? Punita ji, you wear many hats, and one of them is that you are Director, India ESG Network. So from that capacity, I'm motivated to ask you, as an aggregator of the ESG, kind of community, or people who are looking at it, who are consuming it, how do you see the space and the discourse on nutrition? How do you see this kind of happening? Is there a place? Could that be sharpened further? Any reflections from the ESG stakeholder lens? So Punita ji, if you're there.
Yes, I'm there. Yeah, you can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So thanks a lot, Dr. Smriti, and thank you, Catalyst 2030, for this opportunity. So first of all, it's very motivating to see that we've reached a stage where we are doing discussions specific to SDGs. Because I've seen many forums and discussions where, we are talking about all the 17 SDG goals and the various reporting. But now very focused groups are coming up, which are focusing on specific SDGs. So coming to the SDG 2 and 3 on nutrition and the health and well-being, see, all the SDGs are ultimately interlinked and they do roll into the reporting of the BRSR, which has been designed by the SEBI. So if you look at the SEBI guidelines, there are 9 NGRBC principles, which were rolled out by the Ministry of Company Affairs. And these principles are deciding all the parameters under which organizations will start reporting. So all these principles somewhere are interlinked to the SDG goals where they contribute. So as organizations or the top 1,000 listed companies are already reporting, they are now trying to interlink all these principles and their adherence to the SDG goals. If we see globally what is happening, globally the sustainability reporting frameworks are much more ahead and they are going more detailed into sector specific. And hence the linkage to the SDG goals is more clear. It comes out more clearly in their reporting. But in India, we are at the stage where BRSR was introduced. And so in India also, if you see since 2009, there have been various guidelines. So ESG is not something new. We had the CSR guidelines, we had the NVG principles, then they became NGRBC principles. And now we have the BRR, then the BRSR. So the whole ESG framework has been evolving over a period of time, last 14, 15 years. And now we have the BRSR core also, which is further detailing out all the environment parameters, the waste, water parameters. So what is happening that now even SEBI is even looking at, there's a glided path and they are saying that right now it's only 1,000 companies, but they intend to roll it down to maybe 10,000 in the next 3 years. The value chain will also start rolling in. So when these numbers and data and frame come in the form of a framework, it is more easier to decide the actionables. So if you look at all the parameters, it's not that they are new. If you look at pollution, you look at FSSAI guidelines, all these organizations have been aware, they have been reporting. But with ESG coming in, it's putting everything in a perspective, in a framework, where one can see and see around all the 9 principles which have been designed, how the organizations are contributing towards various goals. And it is making it more transparent, accountable, and responsible. So the whole ESG framework is now giving what is behind not just financial numbers, but even the non-financial parameters. So as we say, there are principle 3, which talks about health and well-being of employees. Today, we do not have maybe the nutrition parameters, but yes, as we just discussed, that down the line, SEBI has plans to keep enhancing the parameters and the frameworks, because these parameters should be incorporated and should come out in the reports which organizations do. So gradually, this is what we are heading towards, that all the parameters will be further detailed out, and they will also become sector specific, the way we see GRI and the way we see global standards already. So the nutrition framework, as you are saying, and these more and more detailing will have to be done specifically by the food and beverage industry more. Because currently the principles do say that what you provide as products, are they sustainable and safe? Where you source your products from, are they sustainable? So organizations are doing many such initiatives. If you see the reports of likes of Nestle or Unilever, they are really detailing out how they are sourcing the products, how they are changing it into more sustainable ways, and how they're even providing it to the market. So we are seeing those shifts happening, and the framework is allowing people to take those initiatives towards a better tomorrow and achieving SDG 2 and 3 more and more.
Great, thank you. So Punita ji, the message that you can correct me, that I am getting, and I might be biased, is that although all these reporting formats that have come and emanated from ESG, I think they have a lot of parameters as is, but what I'm hearing is that there is a place to detail down further and detail down sector wise and detail down, the principle wise, and other reporting formats in the globe, they are kind of following it, and the reporting as such is kind of at a nascent stage, if we were to say, in India. So there is so it's a good valid inquiry path that I think you're trying to say. Great. Which brings me to invite Indrajit. Indrajit, now I come to you, and I look at you from two lenses. One is the nutrition, the SDG 2 3 person. And I remember when I was talking to Punita ji, she was like, I am the ESG person. I'm not really the nutrition person. So we had some conversation to get her to come to this panel, and she realized, no, there is need. But Indrajit, you are already somebody who is in that domain subject wise, but also I know you have thoughts and your insights around the ESG atmosphere that is evolving in the country. So, if I may invite you now to kind of reflect on this space and the discourse that we are happening from your experience and these two lenses that you carry. So, please, Indrajit, over to you.
Thank you, Smriti, and I think it's a great group of people, and specifically ATNI. I keep tracking you, Greg. Tracking what ATNI is doing is one of the main source of inspiration that something will happen from the ESG space on nutrition. ATNI is doing a fabulous work on that space. So I'll say, first of all, we need an additional $10.8 billion, $10 billion per year for nutrition, if we want to, like, between 2022 and 2030, if we really want to achieve the goal, particularly specifically for the nutrition goal, and taking only four most important indicators, $10 billion. So that is not possible through philanthropic investment, which is quite clear that philanthropic investment will not be sufficient to fulfill that gap. Now, coming back to, that means that we'll require money from other sources, and probably business money getting channelized for nutrition. That is very, very important. First of all, as Smriti, you were already talking about, is that we need to look at it from two different angles. One is a related industry, which is food and beverage, and also agriculture. I think we are not talking about agriculture, food and beverage and agriculture, these industries, and unrelated industries. With the related industries, there are a lot that can be done, and both of them we should have a very different approach to both of these kinds of industries. For the food and beverage and other for the related industries, I think we're like talking about the standards, talking about what they're using, where they're procuring from, etc., is important. And overall, in the ESG framework that is coming out, though the SEBI regulation, even the present BRSR framework, as Punita ji just mentioned about these 9 principles, I don't think there is a very, very explicit mention of that reporting. But as it is, I know it's a nascent stage, and it'll evolve over a period of time. I'm sure that things will come over there. But there, the discussion, as Greg was mentioning, that 70% is a unhealthy food product that is coming out, and what else can be done over there? Can there be a something around taxation policies, like something that gives that industry more return on investment on investing in healthy food products. If I give you one single data from one of the states, Bihar, in India, we did a very large survey over there, and found out that all the children between 6 to 24-month-old children, they are getting something. They're getting a biscuit every day. They're getting some biscuits. 50% of those children are getting biscuits every day. So this shows, and those biscuits are, of course, not the HS, like high sugar, high salt biscuits, and not the nutritious biscuits that we can think of. So I think with the food and beverage industry, there are a lot that can be done, and there are a lot the different industries are doing also, as like ITC's report. If you look at Unilever's report, so I think most of them are getting conscious about it. So that's about that industry. About the other industries, like the unrelated industries, there is a like how we can actually put them into the doing nutrition indicators. That requires probably some thoughtful insertion of nutrition mandate in the ESG framework. Without that, that's not going to happen. Like if I look at say even for the workforce nutrition that we were talking about, if for that the current this thing talks very less about that, and there are of course there's infant care policy. We should also talk about the breastfeeding and breastfeeding related giving because that's also a very important part of the nutrition, and specifically for the factory workers, whether they're getting enough maternity leave, getting enough whether there's creche and possibilities of breastfeeding the child. So those are also things that needs to be looked at. So that is one part for the workforce nutrition, and maybe the infants of the workforce. So that's one part that's easy. Not easy, that's something that is doable. What is not there at all, and where I think we must look into. So if you look into green bonds or sustainability bonds, till now I think there are only two bonds which has explicitly talked about nutrition. One was this IBRD bond in Japan, and another was one domestic SDG bond that was in Mexico. So only two bonds which talked about put nutrition as a specific indicators over there. So there could be more green bonds. There are some impact bonds. GAIN probably was working on one impact bond which will take nutrition into account. But until unless there are resources available of this kind, probably the intent for these kind of industries to invest into nutrition will be much lesser. So saying so, I say that there are also problems in the nutrition field itself on how to include nutrition for these kind of industries. First of all, unavailability of very clear-cut metrics. I think very clear-cut metrics, which is number one, objective. There are lots of objective measurement indicators, we know, but objective and easily measurable indicators. So I think that needs to be there. So kind of indicators that we generally use, like the WHO's indicators, etc., doesn't really fit in the bill of the measurement in the ESG context. So I think metrics measurement will be one very important thing. Second thing that's important is probably creating platform or intervention package where the industries can invest. So that's also something that I'm thinking of for a very long time, but today there's no time to talk about it. But we can talk about what kind of interventions where they can easily invest resources for that. And the third part is what we are probably trying to do here is like probably building a coalition, building all the voices together for nutrition, which will do and will also take the government alongside, and will do advocacy with the corporate. So I think these are the three things that is very much required from the nutrition perspective. And from the ESG perspective, I think the most important thing is to how can we put specific nutrition mandates, specific nutrition indicators in the frameworks and in the available frameworks. So I think this is my basic thought.
Thanks, Indrajit. I think two things. What you said is, I think it's time that the nutrition community and the corporate ESG regulation, stakeholder, consumer community sit together, so that, because you said advocacy, and I think, and I was talking to Pankaj last evening, and I just bring him in, and we were discussing that, there are such communication gaps and the language gaps, the messaging kind of gets lost in the communication medium. So I think that is what is needed. But secondly, Indrajit, very interesting point, how you separated the related and unrelated industries. In that, I think the human capital side of it, because whatever industry it is, there is human capital involved, less, more, various segments, but it is involved. So in that case, what Greg was saying earlier, the sector agnosticism, if that's a word, kind of plays a role when we look at at least the workforce side of it from the nutrition investment and indicators. And like Punita ji said, that the principle 3 has employee well-being, but then kind of sharpening it a little more and seeing really what it means. Is it just insurance, or is it just safety? Is it just hazard, or it is the value in the nutrition investment in the employees that kind of, is brought out? Because I strongly feel when businesses see value in something, and a value not just from an ethical or righteous kind of lens, but from an investment lens and an ROI lens, there will be kind of a push and pull to kind of get the nutrition into mainstream. So thanks, Indrajit, for bringing those points up. And actually, you have set the stage perfectly for the next segment that I want to get into. And I want to turn to Ashwini Thakkar and Tarun Vij to, because both of them, Ashwini comes from Arogya World, which is an NGO on NCD prevention, and there is this program of healthy workplace. That's a huge program there. And Tarun comes from his huge experience from a huge experience period, but huge experience from GAIN on the workforce nutrition side of it. So if I may invite you guys, and we'll get Ashwini to come first, ladies first, to kind of just share, what is really the business case for nutrition? Why should companies invest in the employees, in the nutrition of their employees? If you could just focus on that, because both of you are associated, have been associated with these programs where companies are kind of buying in. So is there a business case beyond righteousness, beyond the ethics of it? And if you could kind of just tell us, the group, a little more about these programs and the pitch here, basically the selling pitch here. So Tarun, with your permission, may I invite Ashwini to go first?
Sure.
Ashwini, I hope you're there. I saw
Thank
you.
Smriti. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this forum. I think it's an excellent topic that we are talking on, nutrition. And I think most recently, my most favorite topic is ESG, because, everybody talks about sustainability, but I mean, both are equally important. Sustainability, according to me, is like the motivation, and ESG is the measured outcome. So, I think it is very, very important to have this discussion. Coming back to workforce, with my years of experience of having worked in preventive healthcare and working with different organizations around preventive healthcare, I think one of the key areas or the key concerns that we have seen is a clear and simple guideline around food. So I think one of the most important things is that for manufacturing locations, and I'm coming from my experience in working in both manufacturing, non-manufacturing, areas. Manufacturing locations still have some regulatory requirement as per the India Factories Act. But the non-manufacturing locations, which is a huge, where we have field employees, we have office-based employees, there is no, there's a very, or I would say there may be some guidelines, but not a regulatory requirement per se. So it becomes very, while there is increased focus on employee well-being, and post-COVID, I think the focus has increased even more. But because there is no clear guideline, most of the organizations are doing what they think is good for their employees. So I think there is a clear requirement, or like Indrajit said, it has to be simple. Let's not make it complex. It has to be simple. And like everybody said, the social vertical of ESG is all about what does a company do, or what does an organization do to improve lives. So, that is a very, very important metric that I think needs to be there. Companies are trying to get there, but in their own ways. So I think what we need is a very clear and simple guidelines. What Arogya World is doing, in terms of creating healthy workspaces, one of the most important thing that Arogya World does is provide a framework which is data driven, and has measurable outcomes. So I think that's amazing. It's a beautiful program that Arogya World has kind of set in, which includes everything physical and mental well-being. But providing that framework to organizations is very, very critical. And that is what I think, a lot of organizations, we have more than 200 companies, but a lot of organizations are kind of appreciating that framework. And it's not just small, but it is large organizations, government organizations, startups. So basically, providing that guiding framework, which includes a guideline for nutrition, is very, very important. In my previous work that I used to do with the commercial organizations, the topmost, when we look at, the topmost health risks that organizations have seen, if they go to kind of, assess what is their top 3 health risks or top 4 health risks, the topmost is unhealthy eating, followed by physical inactivity, followed by stress and tobacco use. So it is the topmost. And that is something there, and there have been multiple studies that we have seen that for every dollar that you invest in employee well-being, at least $6 come back to you. And every dollar that is spent on healthcare costs, you lose another $3, from an organization perspective. So there have been plenty of studies are available. And I think so, from my perspective, nutrition is important. The ESG social, vertical, where you're able to kind of measure outcomes. Why are you doing what you are doing is the question that you need to ask. So measurable outcomes are important, and driving this in a very simple way, I think that is, and Arogya World is trying to do it in their own way.
Great. So Ashwini, I think once you have kind of answered that business case for nutrition. Second, I think 2 resounding messages from your this thing is keep it simple and keep it tangible and measurable. So measurable does not, I mean, it has to be, if it is measurable, it will be tangible, and then it does not have to be complex. So thanks for that. Tarun, over to you. Your thoughts on this whole business of nutrition and workforce nutrition. Over to you.
Thank you, Smriti. Very, very insightful comments by everybody, particularly Ashwini. So I think the business case for workforce nutrition, you start with good governance and prudent risk management. First 2 issues to be looked at. Investors globally are increasingly recognizing that a focus on governance leads to long-term improvement in the performance of companies, and that entities that do well on transparent reporting, particularly on ESG targets, also do well on financials through attracting lower cost of capital. Very important here. You attract a lower cost of capital through better governance, lesser attrition, lower operational costs, and lesser business disruption on account of stakeholder conflicts. Additionally, globally and in India, talent is increasingly recognizing the benefits of employment that creates a tangible impact over roles that pay well. Specific to workforce nutrition, there is increasing recognition of the relevance of improved employment practices, workforce well-being, health and nutrition, attracting and retaining talent, and improved partnership with suppliers. There is also an awareness of risks related to poor workforce nutrition, such as low productivity, incidents and mistakes, risks of NCD cases, high staff turnover, absenteeism, and high healthcare costs. There is awareness now and early adoption by first mover of potential strategies and smart targets for workforce nutrition. These include 1, availability of healthier eating options at the workplace, breastfeeding support to mothers returning to work, and confidential health checks and nutritional counseling for employees. Now, there is a large body of evidence available, and I can cite without getting too technical on one, which looks at a meta-analysis of about 26 studies, with 21 of which were systematic reviews and 5 were random controlled trials. So, these reviews revealed that comprehensive workforce nutrition programs or contexts where workforce nutrition is embedded in a broader employee welfare effort is more impactful. So we're talking about health and wellness and ESG. Embedding workforce nutrition there is a smart idea. This significantly reduces employee-related risks in a business and maximizes employee satisfaction and staff retention. Second, targeted programs for high-risk groups by corporates also showed positive outcomes for nutrition, health, and for business. And these high-risk groups were diabetic people, these were obese and overweight people, etc. And the nutrition-focused health checks and the counseling played an important part in creating that wellness. For business outcomes, and let me be very transparent here, there is more evidence on the impact of breastfeeding support to mothers returning to work and health checks and counseling for employees. More evidence is needed on the experiences of companies offering healthy food at work and nutrition education. Most of the literature, most of the studies, most of the random controlled trials are from developed economies and mature markets, and mostly analyzing shorter term interventions, 6 months, 8 months, 1 year. Nobody looked at data over longer periods of time because these enabling policies have not been instituted systematically for longer periods. So this leads to the need for more evidence and research in low and middle income countries and emerging markets, and analyzing data for longer periods. GAIN and AT&I are working on a materiality study that will be focused on low and middle income markets, and we hope to share those results in due course. Very happy to see, and Greg is very much here, AT&I and the World Benchmarking Alliance already use workforce nutrition metrics in their assessments and reporting. There's much more that I can talk about, but I thought for starters,
Yes.
let me speed up
Yes.
in the right quadrant. Thank you.
Absolutely. That is why I did a blanket apology. 3-5 minutes is not enough time. But Tarun, I think thank you for bringing that very important point. Right now, till now, we were saying ESG, and S has a space for that employee well-being. There is a slice placeholder there. But thank you for bringing about the governance side of it and the risk mitigation side of it, because that means then nutrition needs to feature in the materiality analysis, and hence the risk mitigation, and hence the governance angle of it. So really it's through and through across the spectrum. So thank you for that, and eagerly kind of waiting to see the results of the studies that you're saying, that shows the evidence. So I think what we have done so far is we started with this ESG whole, this evolving space, trying to scratch the surface there, and then look at these two kind of initiatives, so to say, that are embedding that space and the nuances there. And while we are talking about the business case for nutrition, let me get into the last and the final segment, which is the finance of it. And for that, I had invited Rishabh, Karthik, and Pankaj. Their LinkedIn profiles are there for you to see. But if we were to now think about, how to look at mainstreaming nutrition, one thing both the previous speakers, Ashwini and Tarun, you both said, getting those efficiencies within the systems, within the corporate systems, that is there. And I think Indrajit said that. But if we were to look at this entire space of blended finance and impact assessments, how does nutrition, are investors looking at nutrition Is nutrition is like a shiny thing for in the impact investment or the blended finance space? What are the innovative kind of tracks there? One. And I know Pankaj would really love to hear some grassroots level stories from you on how all this kind of translates onto the field. So let me invite. I will save Pankaj for the end, and let me start by inviting Rishabh. Rishabh was supposed to join late. I got a message. Rishabh, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, great. So over to you.
Right. So, thank you for having me here. It, nutrition as a subject is something that I engaged with almost 10 years ago when I joined the dev sector. And I feel like there's so much that has happened in the country over the last decade, particularly our slide in nutritional indicators across the board. It's surprising that there aren't there aren't enough domestic philanthropists who are interested in the idea of nutrition. In fact, um, conversely speaking, I've seen that a lot of startup founders find a lot of interest in the idea of nutrition. So most recently, I was an advisor to a philanthropic foundation, which is supported by Zerodha, which is one of India's largest brokerage firms. And in Zerodha, you are rewarded for being healthy, which means that if you're able to, so for example, um, reduce your weight, or if you're able to sort of take a target and reach that target for yourself, you're rewarded with cash amounts to kind of um uh, reach that goal. And the point that I'm trying to make is that while the private sector seems to have taken into account, nutrition and well-being as something that needs to be taken care of, I don't know if commensurate public spending is happening in that space. So I can only speak from the point of view of philanthropy and what I see in the social sector. I don't think nutrition is a shiny object. And the question, therefore, that remains for us is how do we bring nutrition back into the center? Because um, clearly it has very clear, I mean, it has a direct linkage in the well-being of a child, in the well-being of a population. Um, you know, Post-pandemic, it seems like there is another opportunity now to talk about the overall impact, particularly in poor people, in people from low income backgrounds, in from particular communities, um, to bring donor interest back into this. There is also an opportunity, I feel, with new age instruments, whether it's mutual funds, whether it is social stock exchange, whether it is other instruments, including impact bonds, to see if nutrition can be blended into conversations in education, conversations of health, or even if there's an opportunity to bring multiple nonprofit actors and players together to kind of build a global push, or at least an India level push on nutrition. I feel also with the increased focus on climate and sustainability as sort of central topics, nutrition is also something that can form an important part of the conversation. Ultimately, any population that is able to take care of climate at the local level has to be healthy, has to be able to respond, or at least like use local biodiversity for their livelihood, for their nutrition, for their food security, all of those things. So I feel there are multiple avenues today. The question really is that is civil society ready, or even if not just civil society. I feel even if philanthropists are willing to look at the intersectionality of nutrition with other subjects, and nutrition as a central topic, I don't see that happening soon. I think we also have to be prudent to understand that the zeitgeist is not nutrition anymore. And so if we can intersect it with whatever is popular today, I think we'll probably be able to move in more money today. That's all from
Yeah,
my side.
thanks. Thanks, Rishabh, for calling it that nutrition is not a shiny object. I think all of us from the nutrition angle are a little biased towards it. We try to kind of, but that's the reality, and the sectorality of it is sometimes I think it makes nutrition and health like an orphan because it's everywhere and it's not there. So, in the interest of time, we have about 10 minutes remaining. Karthik and Pankaj. So, Karthik, you first. Could you reflect? I know this is a hard one, and I don't expect an answer from you here. But Rishabh said it's not really the priority. Could you, in your this thing, reflect how it could be in 2 to 3 minutes, and then Pankaj, if you could add on to that. So, Karthik, over to you.
Thanks a lot. Are you guys able to hear me? Great. I think a lot of very insightful points have been made over the last 45 minutes or so, and they all sort of converge very nicely into this whole realm of where blended finance could play a role. And I think broadly, if we were to look at finance as an avenue to either mainstream or catalyze related interventions in the nutritional space, there are four broad clusters that we can look at. And I think, as Rishabh mentioned, right, the first cluster, which is the use of technical assistance or the use of grants, etc., has been quite minimal and quite negligible when it comes to actually figuring out how to mainstream. And there is need for both domestic resource mobilization and contributions, and also trying to figure out how international aid could actually be channelized more. I think at the start of the conversation, there was talk about the fact that the financing gap is close to $10 billion. And I think it's quite disheartening to see that less than 1% of the global international aid actually flows into nutrition. So I think that is one space that really needs to be looked at quite actively. And we need to look at technical assistance, not just from the viewpoint of trying to promote accessibility or affordability. We need to look at the entire value chain, right from the raw materials to production, to the storage, to the distribution, and then basically eventually to the consumer, whether that comes by way of knowledge or that comes by way of advocacy. So I think it's sort of critical to look at the value chain of nutrition and then figure out where the role of technical assistance and grants could actually play a very, very critical or a catalytical role. The second cluster is basically what was spoken about. And I think there we talk about results-based financing and results-based performance. And I think there have been a couple of instances where it has been demonstrated quite clearly that focusing on certain outcomes do create an incentive for a risk investor to actually come in and make that kind of upfront capital available for programmatic intervention. The kangaroo mother care in the context of Cameroon was actually quite sort of pertinent as we think about really providing support for preterm and low birth weight infants, and trying to figure out how KMC in combination with breastfeeding, in combination with warmth, can actually improve neonatal as well as pediatric outcomes, specifically for low birth weight. And there is provision to actually deepen that further in markets like Kenya, or in the context of sub-Saharan Africa. You do see that there are benefits packages like the Linda Mama scheme, or there is focus on non-communicable disease, but then within that there are like close to 12 to 30 interventions, including salt reductions, including adoption of physical activity, that is seen as a very valid evidence-based intervention to actually figure out how nutrition and healthy food intake can actually contribute to lower burden due to non-communicable disease. But in this segment, the focus still remains broadly clinical. As Rishabh just mentioned, that it is quite important to actually look at this from a broader perspective, where you can really deliberately try to embed nutrition in the context of gender, in the context of education, as well as in the context of health. So I think from an outcome-based financing perspective, it is quite important to think about that intersectorality quite critically, because that is what is going to eventually attract risk investors to come on board. The third cluster is largely this whole space around debt and equity and a variety of instruments that range in between them. And I think here there are a few examples that we can talk about, not specific to nutrition, but you do see that there are a lot of accelerators which are actually coming in. There are a lot of social enterprises and startups at different stages of maturity that can benefit from different kinds of asset classes. And I think so cardio for cities is one example where cities are incentivized to largely become NCD free. And towards that, it is quite important to think about what are the kind of market-based solutions that can be supported. And there, to ensure that we have a range of equity instruments or debt instruments, whether it is going to be a low-cost concessional debt, whether it is going to be pure play equity, whether it's going to be a combination of equity coupled with technical assistance to ensure that the organizational capacity, the reporting, etc., all of that can actually help help the social enterprise become more agile in the way it tries to operationalize the value proposition, and at the same time tries to deliver the kind of expected suboptimal returns on investment for an impact lean investor is quite critical to consider. And the last space, as the companies become more mature, it is quite important to think about de-risking mechanisms, guarantees that can be firmly embedded to ensure that they are in a position to actually scale quite a lot. There is quite a lot to speak across these four clusters and where they can be specifically sort of applicable, but in the interest of time, maybe I'll just pause here
Sure.
and I hope that suffices.
Sure. Sure. No, I think I also I kind of very good points there, very categorical. On the city, this thing, there is an initiative that I'm really excited about, but there's no time there. But we will keep this conversation going, Karthik. Thank you. Let me quickly bring in Pankaj for the last word, and then kind of really wrap it up. I do see, again, just a disclaimer, I see raised hands. Please, guys, put your questions, thoughts, reflections in the chat. I see Arvind, I see Girish, who have already done. Thank you, Girish, for the pointers. But Pankaj, please, we want to hear from you before we run out of time. Pankaj, over
Thanks,
to you.
Vicky. So instead of trying to add a new point, now let me kind of provide an alternative perspective to points made by a couple of other people. So when Tarun and Ashwini talked about the value of nutrition, completely non-deniable, right? Whatever you're saying. Let's look at what corporates do in reality when a assurance or a reporting requirement is put on them or a compliance requirement is put on them. We have seen it in EIAs earlier. They simply get rid of that space which requires to be complied with, right? And the governments have been very massive enablers of this kind of a, I'm using the very crude word, stunt that corporates are allowed to do. In workforce, we have already seen all the progressive rules and regulations about workforce welfare. Companies have got rid of the lower category, lower strata of workforce. So there will be those fancy juice bars and salad bars and healthy, but for the elite of the workforce, the quote unquote labor would work for Quest will not even be appearing on your reports as an employee, and therefore will not even be eligible for most basic things that they're eligible for at the moment. So while as activists we push for better enforcement, better compliance, better facilities, the stock corporate response in India has been, given the loopholes available, to actually get rid of the risk rather than actually address the risk. So that is one challenge that we are likely to see happening. We've already seen it happen at the workforce level, because I know for companies I have been involved with, 80 to 90% people are now not formally employees of that company. So it creates a huge challenge that you can create a reporting structure, you can make a form in BRSR that talks about employees, you'll get a much smaller number of people reported as employees, right? And that's happening even right now for other regulations. What Rishabh talked about, our own experience was very different, because we did fund a very large variety of nutrition programs, explicitly nutrition programs, where the stated objective was to provide nutrition to a disadvantaged group. And a much larger set of projects, maybe 50% of, we had a 300 crore portfolio annually, around 50% of the projects would have used nutrition as one of the final outcomes that we were targeting, like a water conservation program would definitely have child and nutrition as one of the objectives that you are tracking. It doesn't appear explicitly in the title of many projects. That's a challenge, yes. But I don't think it is as neglected as one would imagine it to be. There are many corporates for whom child and supporting a child, I think, is fairly attractive. Nutrition is in that way blessed. I mean, one of the colleagues said that when you go into workforce nutrition, all the indicators and all are challenging. Thankfully, at a child level, we do have very robust indicators, globally accepted. Historical trends are available. So impact investors, even CSR philanthropists, don't see that as a challenge, that they are able to see changes, transitions happening in a fairly short time. So there is one pessimistic perspective that all the good things we are talking about in terms of compliance and enforcement might result in denial of even the most basic facilities available to a large portion of the entry level or the shop floor workforce. And I would imagine it is not as bad as we think, because nutrition might not be explicitly mentioned, but it's definitely a part of a majority of the programs that I have looked at, in fact. Sorry, Smriti, I mean, I don't think we have enough time to get into other stories.
Yeah, no, but we do have to catch up, and thank you. So for you, you should know Pankaj, and so he is a co-Aspire fellow. So I took the liberty, and he kind of shoulders a lot of Aspire impact reports that come out. So I took the liberty to jo ghar ke log hote, to kind of put him at the end and then give him the minimum time. But I don't really want to conclude this session, really. Because as I said, and we mean it, that this is the first conversation that we are having, and we do. And today, if I see the chat, and if I see Giridhar, sorry, I mispronounced your name. There are a lot of way forwards, but a lot of food for thought. There is a pessimistic view, there is an optimistic view. So I think what at the end of this, let's call spade a spade. Let's say that nutrition is not the focus in certain areas, and let's figure out how it can be and what are the challenges around it. So really, I don't want to, normally I conclude the session, but this is an ongoing conversation. And thank you all for bringing your perspectives at the top of your head, that you kind of got in. And we, in fact, you should know that in December in Bangalore, the Catalyst 2030 group, the India Nutrition Collaborative Group, and more are meeting in person to kind of bring forward this food for thought. So thank you. You have given us a lot of food for thought. And when I say it is a point of start, please, all my speakers, we take you for granted, and we will come back to you for follow-up questions. Thank you for being so kind. I truly respect your time, and we are already 5 minutes over. So I think I'll conclude the session, but not the conversation. Thank you for embedding us with so many thoughts and perspectives to keep the conversation going. So thank you all. This is all from our side, Catalyst 2030 India Nutrition Collaborative, and let's keep the conversation going. We have to solve this, and we will solve this. I think together we will solve this. So thank you. I'm hopeful.
Thank you. Thank you.